Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're heading deep into the woods, straight into the vast, untamed expanses of our national parks and wilderness areas. These are places of just breathtaking beauty, but they also hold a staggering, honestly unnerving secret. When you're looking out over thousands of acres of dense forests, deep canyons, and rugged mountains, it's so easy to feel small. But what actually happens when that vastness simply swallows someone up? Today, we're going to break down the terrifying reality, the popular mysteries, and the genuinely fascinating science of disappearances in the wild.
Consider this incredibly chilling quote right from the National Park Service's cold case files. It reads, "Almost 40 years after Chiricahua National Monument Ranger Paul Fugate went for a hike and vanished without a trace, the mystery remains." Think about that. Ranger Fugate was working at the visitor center back in 1980, walked out the door in his official uniform for a quick hike, and was literally never seen again. No clues, no trace. Just gone. It's the kind of unsettling reality that hooks you right away, right? How does a highly experienced ranger just vanish?
Section 1. Vanished without a trace. The perplexing reality of unresolved wilderness cases.
So every single year, hundreds of people wander into the woods and never return. Now, search and rescue teams do find the vast majority of lost hikers, thank goodness, but there is this haunting subset of cases that remained completely unresolved, leaving investigators and families with literally nothing but questions. To really grasp the scope of this, we just have to look at the official case files, which span all ages and experience levels. You've got 7-year-old Dennis Lloyd Martin, who vanished while playing with other kids on a family outing in the Great Smoky Mountains. Then there's 14-year-old Stacey Ann Ress, who stepped just off the trail to take photos in Yosemite and disappeared while an elderly man in her group was resting right nearby. And then there's 74-year-old Peter Jackson. He was an experienced hiker, excellent physical condition, who left his campsite for what was supposed to be a simple day hike and never returned. It really doesn't matter how old you are or how much experience you have. The wilderness is absolutely impartial.
And just to really emphasize how baffling and incredibly serious these unresolved cases are, $60,000. That is the current reward offered by the National Park Service for any information regarding the whereabouts of Ranger Paul Fugate. Decades later, they are still looking, still desperately hoping for a break in the case.
Section 2. The Missing 411 Theory. David Paulides and the Search for Patterns.
Okay, so with so many bizarre, unexplained disappearances, human nature kind of demands answers. We want to know why. Enter David Paulides and his missing 411 theory. His background is actually quite interesting. On one hand, Paulides has a 20-year career in law enforcement, working in patrol, SWAT, and detective divisions. So he approaches these cases with a detective's eye. But on the other hand, his current focus and the organizations he's founded heavily explore unexplained and potentially paranormal phenomena. He's authoring books and hosting events that dive into Bigfoot, UFOs, and even interdimensional portals. He uses his investigative background to suggest that something highly unusual and perhaps even otherworldly is happening out there in our national parks.
Now, Paulides claims to have identified specific, recurring profile points that connect these baffling cases. According to his theory, it's highly suspicious if a missing person is found in close proximity to water or near boulder fields and granite. He points out that sudden, severe weather changes often occur right after a disappearance, which obviously hampers search efforts. He notes instances where search dogs inexplicably just lose the scent. And, strangely enough, he claims a statistically significant number of these missing persons are of German descent. He basically argues that when you stack all these points together, they suggest a mysterious, unseen force is at work.
But this brings us to a highly provocative question. If a missing person is found near water or near a huge deposit of granite rock, does that actually mean the cause of their disappearance is supernatural? Or is our brain just desperate to find a pattern where none exist? Let's pivot from the eerie mysteries of the missing 411 theory for a second and apply some logical, statistical, critical thinking to these claims. Section 3. Correlation versus causation. Debunking the profile points with data and logic. Now, what's genuinely fascinating when we break this down is that when data scientists and analytical communities take a hard look at these profile points, the mystery dissolves pretty quickly. Missing near granite? Well, granite is literally the most common rock in the Earth's crust. Entire parks like Yosemite are made almost entirely of the stuff. Missing near water? Water is everywhere in the wilderness, and it's where people naturally camp, hike, and play. Sudden bad weather? Mountain weather is scientifically proven to be highly volatile. Storms roll in rapidly out of nowhere, and yes, that bad weather tragically hampers search efforts. What about dogs losing a scent? Tracking dogs are incredible, absolutely, but they aren't infallible machines. Rain, wind, and just the passage of time rapidly degrade scents. These points don't prove a supernatural cause at all. They really just describe the natural environment where people happen to get lost. In fact, data scientist Kyle Polich actually ran the raw numbers on these disappearances, and his conclusion is incredibly clarifying. As he says right here, "I've exhausted my exploration for anything genuinely unusual. Not a single case stands out, nor do the frequencies involved seem outside of expectations." Ultimately, when you strip away the spooky music and look at the actual data, the number of people going missing and where they go missing fits perfectly within the expected statistical frequencies for natural hazards.
Section 4. The Psychology of Lost, the Actual Science of Spatial Disorientation.
So, if it's not a monster or portal taking these people, why do they vanish and why do they sometimes behave so strangely before they die? To really understand this, we have to transition away from data science and into human biology and clearly define what it actually means to be lost. According to cognitive science, being lost is a state of spatial disorientation. It basically means you are unable to identify your present location with respect to known locations, combined with having zero effective means of reorienting yourself. You don't know where you are, you don't know where home is, and you don't have a map or a compass to fix the problem. To understand why people get spatially disoriented in the first place, we have to look at two different types of environmental awareness. First, there's survey knowledge. That's having a mental map of the terrain, almost like you're a bird looking down from above. You understand how the whole area connects. Route knowledge, however, is just knowing a sequence of paths and turns from a first-person perspective, like knowing to take a left at the big oak tree. The crucial point here is that most locals who claim to know the area like the back of their hand only possess route knowledge. The second they step 10 feet off their familiar trail to chase a deer or grab a quick photo, that first-person sequence breaks, and they are instantly, terrifyingly lost. And this is where it gets really wild. When that route sequence breaks and a person realizes they are lost, human biology completely takes over. The body experiences severe, sudden fear. It secretes adrenaline to mobilize for flight. The blood supply rapidly rushes straight to your legs to prepare you to run. This incredibly high emotional arousal physically scatters your thoughts, making basic logical problem-solving nearly impossible. In fact, research shows that terrified adults will often regress to the primitive, irrational reasoning processes of young children. Your body is literally screaming at you to run, while completely shutting down the logical part of your brain that could actually save you. Section 5. Surviving the Wild. Human Behavior When Lost and the Search for Safety. Let's actually map out exactly what people do once their brain is hijacked by fear out there in the wilderness. Because this erratic behavior is exactly why search and rescue teams often find hikers in locations that seem entirely impossible or illogical. Driven by that massive rush of blood to the legs, lost hikers desperately try to reorient themselves using incredibly flawed methods. First, they engage in random traveling. This is just moving blindly along the path of least resistance, just hoping to spot something familiar. Next, they might try route sampling, running frantically back and forth down different forks in a trail, completely exhausting themselves. Then, often driven by sheer overconfidence, they try direction traveling. This is stubbornly walking in a straight line cross-country, ignoring trails, crossing rivers, and pushing themselves right into the thickest, most dangerous brush imaginable. Finally, they try view enhancing, climbing steep hills or scaling trees to spot a landmark, which drastically increases their risk of a fatal fall. And here is the ultimate tragic irony of wilderness survival. The absolute most effective survival strategy, which is almost entirely ignored, is simply staying put. Literally, if you just sit down, search and rescue will likely find you. But because the biological urge to keep moving is so overpowering, the vast majority of lost people completely ignore the one simple tactic that would guarantee their rescue. They walk themselves to death. So, the crucial takeaway here is that we have to shatter the myths we hold about ourselves. The fictional myth is that humans possess a natural, mysterious sixth sense for magnetic direction, that some people just magically know which way is north. The scientific reality? There is no sixth sense. Good navigators don't rely on magic. They actively perform what's called mental updating. They constantly, consciously monitor visual cues, track their turns, and pay sharp attention to their environment. Anyone, no matter how experienced they are, can get lost the very moment they lose focus and stop paying attention. Which leaves us with this. Look, we all love a good mystery. The idea of invisible portals or forest monsters is totally captivating.
But the reality of human biology, the brutal indifference of nature, and the psychological unraveling of the human mind is equally profound and honestly far more dangerous. The next time you step off the trail, will you rely on fictional mysteries, or will you trust the fascinating science of human survival? Stay focused, stay on the trail, and if you ever lose your way, just sit down. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your curiosity alive.